Fast forward to 24 years later, this thing finally goes viral on the internet.
If the public thought this square structure, which is in pretty poor shape, if they're excited about that, they haven't seen anything yet on the surface of Mars.
Today we're speaking with independent Mars researcher and author George Haas. Mr. Haas is the founder of the Cydonia Institute and has previously appeared on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens TV series. His most recent book is titled The Great Architects of Mars: Evidence for the Lost Civilizations on the Red Planet. In this interview, we'll be discussing a large structure on Mars that took the internet by storm in early 2025, known simply as the Square.
So George, I have to thank you for recommending me to Gaia. They flew me out there, put me in a hotel, brought me on the program. I got to talk to Jimmy Church. Jimmy was great and had a wonderful time and got to talk all things Mars. And, it wouldn't have happened without you, buddy, so thank you.
My art background, I was a curator. I did a lot of art shows and worked with a lot of artists, and we tried to all work together, and I brought that same process to all of this Mars investigation. Got to keep the community together.
Collaborative, yeah.
And that's basically what you're trying to do, so it's great.
Yeah. Let's talk the Square on Mars. All right. This feature has been quite popular in the Mars community for quite some time now. The original photo of this was taken way back in 2001. Fast forward to 24 years later, this thing finally goes viral on the internet. And best I can tell, it all started on January 31st with a tweet by Chris Ramsey, who is a magician and documentary filmmaker I had the pleasure of meeting at the Cy Games this past August, here in Virginia, actually. That tweet got 23 million views. Next thing you know, Joe Rogan's retweeting it. "This is effing wild," he says. 16 million more views. And then that got a response from the main Mars guy himself, Mr. Elon Musk. And he says we should send astronauts to Mars to investigate. The Square blew up on the internet.
Yes, it did. It was everywhere. And people like myself that have been studying Mars, since the late 1990s with the Mars Global Surveyor stuff, we were surprised because we had known about this a long time ago and didn't get much attention, only through, researchers like myself. We all looked at this, studied it, and at the time there was only one photograph. It was a very tight, captured the whole square structure. And NASA didn't take any more pictures until, I think, the CTX with the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Then they took like 5 or 6 more images, which all clarified and, confirmed it. But this attention that it's getting from the beginning of the year here in 2025 was pretty extraordinary.
It is, and I think it has a lot of people in the Mars community thinking, where have you guys been? We've been talking about this for years, decades now. This is, thanks guys for finally catching up, but, this is yesterday's news for us Mars guys.
Well, it just shows the power of the internet now with people like Joe Rogan, with podcasts. This venue gets a lot of attention, and for someone like him to bring it forward, and it just blew up, like you said. And so much so that myself and my colleague, William Saunders, we decided to put a science paper out, show the people what this really is, as opposed to them all doing these highly deranged processes they were doing on the square formation with highlighting it and doing all kinds of manipulation. Right. And then, of course, when you do things like that, other people say, well, this is showing that it's really not there because people have to do all of this enhancement.
Right.
So we decided to do a science paper.
One more notable figure who had something to say, this got so popular that Neil deGrasse Tyson had to jump in and...
He didn't want to be left out.
What did he have to say about the whole thing?
Well, he basically criticizes the whole thing, saying it's nothing, it's pareidolia.
Nothing to
see
see here.
If you sit through the video, at the end, he actually comes forward and says, well, it's worthy to go look at. We should, actually put something on the ground there and take a look at it. So he obviously, at the end, says that it's something worth looking at.
Is it required for anyone to comment on an odd structure or an anomalous object photographed by the rovers? Is it required of them to use this word, pareidolia? It just seems like that word must be associated with Mars. Every time you see something that somebody claims is something other than a rock or a mountain, the only other explanation is, well, it's pareidolia.
Well, that's a universal Band-Aid they use to, I think, to make themselves feel better. They use this word pareidolia.
It's a fancy word.
It is very fancy. They don't even know where it comes from. It basically comes back from an old science journal from the 1800s where the word was used. And it talks about a psychological disorder where you see faces everywhere. These are like mental patients. And it's called pareidolia, where people suffer from this. They see faces in the walls and everywhere. So they're trying to equate that type of psychosis with people that are looking at Mars and seeing structures or faces, like the famous face on Mars. So it's a tool that they use to diminish any interest in anything on Mars.
Carl Sagan has this really famous quote that everyone loves bringing up every time someone makes a sensational claim on the internet. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
That's an interesting quote of Carl Sagan's, like you said, used everywhere, but that's not science.
So in response to this famous Sagan quote, I would offer a counter, which is another quote from Sagan. And he says in his book Cosmos, when discussing the possibility of identifying intelligent life on another planet, well, let's just take Earth, for example. And if you are in orbit and you're looking down at Earth, how do you know that there's intelligent life here? And he offers this. Intelligent life on Earth reveals itself through the geometry and regularity of its construction. Meaning,
you look for geometry, you look for the angles, and which you don't find in nature.
Like buildings and roads and
buildings
straight
and roads.
Lines and things like
90-degree angles.
This whole idea that everything has to be attributed to pareidolia just seems to be a bit tired. They keep playing that card. And with Mars, as you and I both know, there's dozens, if not hundreds of anomalies, all distinctly different from one another. And it just seems so easy to just throw the pareidolia term at every single one of them. Really, every single thing? Maybe, sure, maybe this is, maybe that is, but every single thing just seems to be a little too difficult to accept that.
There's probably 8 Mars reconnaissance orbiter images of this, and then they all confirm the square structure.
So our buddy Jean Ward, I've asked him to help us clean up some of these older images, and he's got this really great process on his computer where, he takes these NASA photographs, which are arguably too high contrast. They have these digital, dots, this grid overlay. I don't understand what that is.
So it's a lot of image artifacts that are in some of these.
Image artifacts,
sometimes, yes.
And then sometimes they're of such low resolution, there's too much pixelation all over the thing when you're trying to zoom into stuff. So he's got this really great technique. He is a world-class graphic artist, and in my opinion is doing the work of what NASA should be doing, but he's the one who's doing it. So Jean, great work, buddy. We're going to show some of your cleaned up images of this square here. Back in 2001, this was discovered by...
We believe this was discovered by Richard Hoagland.
For those people who don't know, can you offer just a brief description about who Richard Hoagland is?
Well, for those of the viewers that don't know who Richard Hoagland is, he was very instrumental in bringing the face on Mars to the general public. He had the book, The Monuments of Mars. His book was like a bestseller. So he's very well known. He did a talk at the UN and he's been on television numerous times.
So he played a pivotal role in this idea of Mars disclosure, getting the community and the scientific and the institutions to take a closer look at these odd structures we were seeing in these Viking photographs.
Yes, a lot of his early work was with the Viking images of mostly the Cydonia area, where he saw there was all these alignments with some of the other structures around the face on Mars. There was the famous D&M pyramid, which we talked about in a different episode of this program. All of this geometric structures that were in the area, he talks about in his book, The Monuments of Mars. So he's very well known.
Okay, well, Mr. Hoagland, if you're watching, thanks for all that you've done for us. And, the square on Mars would not have gone viral if it weren't for you, buddy. So thank you very much. Now, fast forward to this year. And as we said, this square went viral on the internet. Was it because the internet attention that you guys decided you wanted to write a paper on it? Like what?
We had figured this was something put into the dustbin of Mars research. And since it got all this new attention, that gave us a new interest to take a look at it again. And we found that there were more images that the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter took. So there was a whole data set that we could work with and possibly put a paper out. And one of the other things that my co-author with my first two books, William Saunders, who's also a geologist or geomorphologist, was that because we had found a lot of structures on Mars, pyramids, all kinds of mound formations that all look very geometric and out of place on the surface, that if the public thought this square structure, which is in pretty poor shape, if they're excited about that, they haven't seen anything yet that we have found already. So we thought this would be a good stepping stone to put a published paper out if we get it published.
Right.
And that would be something to give us a little bit more footing in showing them the other structures.
Good entry point. You got this paper published in the Journal of Astrobiology, essentially arguing for artificiality. Quoting from the abstract, the images reveal the remains of a set of possible linear walls with 90-degree angles, as best as can be determined, at their corners that exhibit a high level of symmetry. The hypothesis of artificial design is presented.
We needed two geologists to do the paper, basically. We had William Saunders, who's a geomorphologist, and I'm a member, the founder of the Cydonia Institute, and we also had another geologist that worked with us, Michael Dale, who has passed away a couple years ago, unfortunately. So we were left with only one geologist.
You needed to find somebody else.
So I contacted my good friend Cliff Dunning, who has the Earth Ancients podcast.
Yep.
And he has a lot of people on his shows and a lot of geologists that talk about Mars topics. So I sent him an email asking him if he could refer me to someone. He sent me Robert Schoch's email.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, Robert Schoch. That would be great. I'm walking on air. So I sent Robert an email, and within a day or two, he got back to me and said, send me the paper. I'll take a look at it, just like that.
That's
I don't even know the guy.
Right.
We send him the paper. About a week goes by. He resends the paper with his geological analysis already added to the paper. And he puts his name on the paper, not at the front, but at the end.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my God, we got Robert Schoch co-authoring a paper with us.
Right.
So we figured we'll submit it. He recommended the Journal of Astrobiology, and we sent it out to them. We had to make a few changes, add a few other details to the paper, and it was accepted. And boom, by the summer, it's published.
Cliff, thanks a lot for that recommendation. We got Robert Schoch on this paper. That's fantastic. So let's take a closer look at this square. There's not just one 90-degree angle, but apparently there are opposing 90-degree angles, which, even to somebody with an untrained eye, seems to suggest it kind of looks like the foundation of a building, because that's what we're used to seeing. When buildings crumble, you generally see a square foundation. Even ancient ruins here on Earth, that's what we see.
The interesting orientation of the square formation is kind of like diamond shaped. It's got the northern points, or the one corner to the north points north, the southern point points south, and then you got east and west. So it's in a strange orientation. It's not just leveled at the north-south orientation. This has the two corners north to south. And the northern corner has a distinct L shape. It's got a 90-degree angle, very geometric. Below that, the southern angle is crested on a ridge, cliff. So it has a very militaristic type of a fortress, so the defensive type of posture. And the east and west corners, you can see them. They're through the different tonality of the surface, but they appear to be covered with dust and debris and probably some type of ice and stuff. You'd have that same thing on Earth if you had a foundation that was just there, it being covered with sand, like out in the desert somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's what it would appear like. And it appears to be the same thing, that this is the foundational structure of some large building that was destroyed.
So you took some measurements. How long was each side?
Square structure is about a mile from side to side. It's about a mile wide. Everything on Mars.
But every side is the same.
Yeah,
measurement.
Everything on Mars is large. So this is about a mile.
No. But every side of this is the same measurement.
Yes, correct. It's completely square,
That's
which is again an oddity.
And where is it located?
It's in a crater. It's in a large crater.
It's in
within
a crater,
close to the edge of this large crater, and NASA contends that this structure was formed by a meteor impact, and it's a fault line, and that's why this structure formed. But in our paper, Robert Schoch and William Saunders discussed that there's no evidence that this is created by a fault. There's no fault debris or lines going outside this crater.
So the area we're referring to is the Rabiatera region of Mars. And it's an area which is heavily populated by impact craters. And the square-shaped structure itself sits inside a massive crater and atop a plateau. It's surrounded by channels which could be formed from an ancient sea or river. And the bedrock is believed to be volcanic or sedimentary, or both, in nature, along with some impact materials such as breccias. And because the structure is located inside an impact crater, one would not expect to find geometric formations of any sort. When you have a massive impact, the material would be blown out in all directions radially, and finding any evidence of geometric shaped features would seem to be impossible. Subsequent geomorphological processes such as glaciation or wind, water, etc., are not going to form geometric structures such as a perfect square. So this is very puzzling. Other processes and endogenic processes such as seismic activity or tectonic activity would be apparent, visually apparent, surrounding the structure itself, and there is no evidence of that.
And when a meteor or whatever hits the planet and creates this large crater, of course it brings up rocks and debris from underneath that come to the surface. But there's no way that rocks and debris come up and form a complete foundation of a square. That's just absurd.
Right. Another quote from the paper here regarding the fact that it's inside a crater, quote, "One would not expect to find linear and geometric shapes, as is evident here, such as right angles and squares."
Correct, yeah.
NASA felt compelled to address the 90-degree angles here. And, they say, quote, "Right angles are not common in nature. They're almost always formed by tectonic forces." And in support of this argument, they provided an image taken from Mars Odyssey orbiter of something that's kind of like a 90-degree angle. It's not exactly, and it's very clearly not the product of a tectonic force. In my opinion, and I'm sure Robert Schoch would agree, this actually looks like plasma discharge scars. Do you know the image that I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. And those lines go off in other directions.
They crisscross all over the place.
Right, and they're parts of other linear things that all look like, possibly natural fault lines or these plasma effects. But again, they're very misleading with their example of trying to diminish any kind of interest in this by showing a detail like that.
To anybody who knows about electrical and plasma discharge, which Robert Schoch does, he's, I guess, one of the world's leading authorities on the subject, that's a signature scar of that. So they're citing something that doesn't even make any sense. You mentioned faulting as a possible geological explanation, and quoting from the paper again, there's no known context on Mars for forming such a fault-bounded plateau. In other words,
they really can't provide any evidence to dispute this, as you can see with their first example.
You go on to say that if the shape existed first, if this square existed first, and say a meteor came down and created that crater,
the whole thing would be destroyed.
Right.
This structure was obviously built after the crater was formed.
Okay, so if the shape came later, quoting from the paper again, the hypothetical fault lines would be much more extensive linearly than is observed in the photographs, intersecting and cutting across the rims of craters, including the major crater in which the square-shaped structure is found. In other words, fault lines would be running much farther distances, right?
Sure, of course, yes.
Like
right through it and beyond, yes.
Through the whole crater, not just inside in
and
a square
making a
formation.
nice little square shape.
Faulting doesn't make perfect square
No,
shapes.
it's just bizarre.
So it's a really ridiculous argument.
Well, they have to come out with some type of comment to dispute what we're writing.
Right.
And that's as good as they got.
Everything always has to come back to geology at some point, doesn't it, with these guys? Now, another fascinating thing you guys include in your paper, of which I was not aware of, and I'm curious, these mounds off to the side of it, the ones that you label F, G, H, and I, who saw these originally?
That was just recently discovered while I was doing the paper. And it's like the face on Mars, are there other structures around it that look artificial, to give more support for your argument.
Right.
So I looked around all through this crater. There's some odd things that are above this that we didn't get into in the paper. We just wanted to focus on this square shape.
At the very least, it seems like there is symmetry here. I don't know if this is perfectly square. It's hard to tell. You did measurements, and between F and G is 1,425 feet. Between H and I is 1,425 feet. But then between F and H, we got 1,735 feet. Between G and I, we got 1,735 feet.
Sagan talks about geometry and regularity.
Right.
This is math.
That's what we're
math
looking for.
is the sacred science.
That's what we're finding.
And there it is.
In the wake of this image going viral and everyone looking at it and being like, holy cow, look, there's a square on Mars, NASA felt like they needed to jump in and add their 2 cents, okay? And they had this guy, Andrew Good, who is NASA's JPL spokesperson, come out and say, trying to debunk what we're all thinking, that this, well, I'll just quote him. He says, look at the corner. That's really a cliffside unrelated to the square. And he continues, it's not the broken walls of a fortress. Like, ooh, like, who said fortress, Andrew?
Nobody said fortress yet.
We just say it's square.
Well, they sometimes come out and say things accidentally.
Right.
And it's that whole psychology where you project onto other people.
Yeah.
He couldn't help himself but say, oh, this isn't a fort.
Right.
When he knows it is.
It looks kind of like a fort.
It's set up in a whole defensive orientation. It's on the cliff.
Right.
And if you were to build a defensive fort, which we have examples here on Earth, that's how you would do it.
He says, it's not the broken walls of a fortress. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Why? Because
he accidentally spoke the truth.
We have terrestrial examples here on Earth. In fact, one that you just found a few days ago that you sent me. Now, this is something in Jordan called the Khirbet al-Lahoun, okay, which looks like what?
Well, if you put these two images side by side and you didn't tell the viewer which one was on Mars, this is almost a doppelganger of what we're seeing on Mars. It is a square structure, an old fortress that's situated right on the cliffside in the desert where there's nothing there now. This is ruins. So you have the foundational walls and its southern corner is jutting out right on a ridge of a cliff.
It's
just
the
like we see on Mars.
Damn thing. So to say that there's not precedent for something like this would be false, and kudos to you for actually finding this. But we have other examples. Something more notable in Israel, something called the Masada.
Right, the Masada is the well-known structure that's over in Israel. That was like one of the last holdouts for the Israeli people when the Romans came in and took over. And that is also a fortress built up on a big cliff overlooking a ridgeline, just like we see on Mars. Now, we also have other examples. There's one in Belize, which was just found recently through LIDAR.
You call this the White City?
That's what the archaeologists are calling it, the White City. They think this is that mythological place that they've been looking for centuries. And they have LIDAR images of this, and I'm sure the viewers out there know about LIDAR. It's this beam that goes down through the foliage and it just bounces back off the ground, and we get these beautiful desolate pictures of the surface of Earth. And kind of looks like what we see on Mars. You know, there's no vegetation, there's no trees on Mars. It looks like just a red desert with ruins here and there.
Yeah.
And this Belize structure is also a square, and it's situated...
There's a bunch of squares. I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah, and the main one is oriented north to south with the corners, just like we see on Mars, and the southern corner is set on the ridgeline of a cliff.
It is funny because we do see these interesting square formations. Besides just the square on Mars, we see these what appear to be pyramid-like formations on Mars that look very similar to what we're seeing here in this LIDAR photograph. And if we're identifying pyramids based on a LIDAR image, which is arguably of less resolution than a photograph, why should we be so quick to dismiss these claims of artificiality on Mars?
Well, I think the scientific community should give the same scrutiny that they're giving to these LIDAR images, finding these archaeological sites, to what we're finding on Mars.
George, I'm going to quote from your conclusion of the paper: as there are no known geological mechanisms that are capable of creating a square form of linear wall-like features with individual right angles inside a crater, we may tentatively hypothesize that this structure could be some form of a large-scale artifact. That is, it was artificially created. Now, I know you've been working on this for a while in the Mars community, Mars independent researchers. That's what we're, proposing, that there's this compelling case to be made for artificial structures on Mars. But you've managed to co-author a paper with one of the most famous geologists in the world, Professor Robert Schoch, who I know does not take this lightly. So for him to co-author this paper with you is nothing short of a magnificent accomplishment. I congratulate you on that, and I think it adds a fair deal of credibility to these claims. Yes, it was a real shock that we got to work with Robert Schoch, no pun intended. But it was just perfect timing. The stars were aligned. Robert had a little downtime. He was getting ready to go to Peru on a trip to do some more research. So he had a very short timeline to do this. I think that's why he added his analysis so quickly and sent it back to me. And then he was off to Peru. So it was like a movie, really. It was amazing how this all just fell in place. And thank God that Cliff Dunning recommended Robert to this paper. If this is in fact an artificial construction, what should we learn from that? Well, I think what we should learn is that even though this structure on Mars inside this crater is highly degraded, it's ruins, that it still can be established that it has geometry in its current status that it's in. This is something that archaeologists being found here on Earth would want to go dig and explore. And I think the scientific community should give the same respect to these structures that we're identifying on Mars, with their support that when we do go to Mars, either with Elon Musk or whoever or however we get to Mars, there may be artifacts that are under the sand that may tell us a lot more about who we are and where we came from.